Daniel bought the watch he always wanted. It told perfect time. But it could not give him one quiet hour of peace. Years before that, Daniel was just a young man with one dream. He wanted to become rich. Not because he loved money, but because he thought money would finally make him feel important. Every morning, Daniel walked past a small tea shop on his way to work. Outside the shop, an old man always sat on the same wooden chair. His name was Mr. Harris. He wore simple clothes. He drank tea from an old cup, and he always looked peaceful. Daniel did not understand him. To Daniel, a peaceful life looked like a poor life. Daniel worked in a tall office building. He always walked fast. He wanted a better job, a bigger apartment, a nicer car, and one expensive watch on his wrist. He believed that when people saw those things, they would finally respect him. So he worked late, he skipped meals, he answered emails at night. And every time he felt tired, he told himself, I am doing this for my future. One morning, Daniel was rushing to work. His phone was in one hand, his coffee was in the other, and his face looked tired. As he passed the tea shop, Mr. Harris looked at him and said, Young man, why do you always run? Daniel stopped for a second. He smiled politely and said, Because I don't want to stay poor. Mr. Harris looked at his old cup of tea. Then he looked back at Daniel. Poor? Is that what you call a man who still owns his morning? Daniel did not know what to say. He looked at the old man's simple clothes. Then he looked at the time on his phone. He was already late, so he walked away. Months passed. Daniel worked harder than ever. He took extra projects. He stayed late at the office. He said no to dinners with friends. He said no to visiting his parents. He said no to rest. And finally, he got promoted. His salary became bigger. His apartment became nicer. One afternoon, Daniel walked into a watch store. Behind the glass, he saw the watch he'd always wanted. It was silver, it was expensive, and it looked like success. When the salesman placed it on his wrist, Daniel smiled. For a moment, he felt proud. For a moment, he felt important. But that night, Daniel sat alone in his apartment. The watch was shining on his wrist. The room was quiet, and his phone kept lighting up with work emails. Daniel looked at the watch. It told him the time, but it did not give him any. The next morning, Daniel walked past the tea shop again. This time he walked slower. Mr. Harris noticed the watch on Daniel's wrist. He smiled and said, That is a beautiful watch. Daniel looked proud. Thank you, he said. I worked very hard for it. Mr. Harris nodded, then he asked, And did it give you more time? Daniel looked at him. He didn't answer. Mr. Harris lifted his old cup of tea and said, A watch can tell you the time, but money should help you own your time. Daniel looked at his watch again. For the first time it felt heavy on his wrist. Daniel smiled like he understood, but deep inside he was not ready to stop chasing. Daniel thought about Mr. Harris's words for a few days, but soon life became busy again. There were more meetings, more deadlines, more bills, more people to impress, and Daniel slowly forgot the old man's question. He told himself, I just need to work hard for a few more years, then I will rest. So he worked even harder. When his friends invited him out, he said, Maybe next time. When his mother called, he said, I'm busy right now. When his body felt tired, he drank more coffee. And when his mind felt heavy, he opened his laptop again. Every month, Daniel made more money, but every month he had less of himself left. One evening, Daniel's mother called him again. This time, her voice sounded soft. She said, Daniel, your father and I are having dinner on Sunday. Come home if you can. Daniel looked at his calendar. There was a work meeting on Sunday. It was not urgent, but his boss might be there. And Daniel wanted to be noticed. So he said, I'm sorry, Mom, maybe next week. His mother was quiet for a moment, then she said, Okay, son, take care of yourself. Daniel promised he would, but he did not. On Sunday evening, he sat in a bright office room. Everyone talked about numbers. Everyone smiled like they were not tired. Daniel looked down at his expensive watch. Then he imagined his parents eating dinner without him. For the first time, success did not feel big. It felt lonely. The next morning, Daniel stopped at the tea shop. For the first time, he was not rushing. Mr. Harris looked at him and smiled. You look tired, the old man said. Daniel sat on the empty chair beside him. He looked at the road. Then he said, I have more money than before, but I don't feel better. Mr. Harris nodded slowly. That is because money is like tea, he said. Daniel looked confused. Mr. Harris pointed to his cup. A little tea warms you, but if you keep pouring, even a good cup will overflow. Daniel looked at his watch. Mr. Harris continued, Money is useful. But if you never know what is enough, it will keep asking for more of your life. Daniel stayed quiet. The old man's words felt simple, but they followed him all day. Years passed. Daniel became more successful than he had ever imagined. He got the bigger office, he bought the nicer car, He moved into a beautiful apartment high above the city. His apartment had a beautiful view, but no one was there to share it with. People respected him now. They shook his hand, they asked for his advice, they called him lucky. But Daniel knew the truth. Luck had helped a little, but most days he had paid for that life with sleep, silence, and missed moments. His phone was always full, his calendar was always full, his bank account was full, but his evenings were empty. Sometimes Daniel stood by his apartment window and looked down at the city lights. Everything below him looked small, but inside he did not feel big. He felt tired, and on his wrist the expensive watch still kept perfect time, but Daniel still had none for himself. One morning, Daniel woke up early. For the first time in years, he had no meeting before work. He looked at his watch. Then he remembered the old tea shop. He remembered the wooden chair. He remembered Mr. Harris and his old cup of tea. So Daniel left his apartment and walked through the city. The streets looked different now. Some shops had changed, some buildings were gone, but the small tea shop was still there. Daniel smiled a little. He walked closer, expecting to see Mr. Harris sitting outside, but the wooden chair was empty. The old cup was not on the table, and for some reason the morning felt quieter than before. Daniel stood there for a moment, then he asked the shopkeeper, "Where is Mr. Harris?" The shopkeeper looked at the empty chair, then he said softly, "He passed away last winter." Daniel did not speak. He looked at the chair again. All those mornings he had rushed past it, all those small lessons he had ignored, and now the old man was gone. The shopkeeper looked at Daniel for a moment. Then he said, "He left something for you." Daniel looked surprised. For me? The shopkeeper nodded and went inside the tea shop. A few seconds later, he came back with a small envelope. It was old and slightly yellow. On the front, Daniel's name was written in shaky handwriting. Daniel opened it slowly. Inside, there was a small note. It said, "Daniel, money is useful only when it gives you back your life." Daniel read the sentence once, then he read it again. He looked at his expensive watch. Then he looked at the empty wooden chair. For years, he had thought money was proof that he was becoming someone. But now he understood. Money was never supposed to make him look important. Money was supposed to help him live with peace. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel sat down. He ordered a cup of tea. He turned off his phone, and he watched the morning pass slowly. That morning, Daniel did not rush to work. He did not check his emails. He did not think about who was ahead of him. He simply sat there holding the warm cup of tea in his hands. For years, he had used money to chase respect. But Mr. Harris had taught him something quieter. Money was not meant to make people clap for your life. Money was meant to help you live a life you do not need to escape from. Daniel looked once more at the empty chair, then he whispered, "I understand now." He had spent years learning how to earn money. But the old man had taught him the harder lesson, how to stop losing himself for it. Because the real purpose of money is not to prove your life to others, it is to give your life back to you.